I had been away from home for almost 8 months, most of that time hopping between rescue deployments in the backcountry of Alaska, where the cold cuts straight through your bones, and the quiet could swallow a person whole. Coming back to Arizona for my little sister's wedding felt like the warmest thing waiting for me on the other side of that winter. I kept imagining the noise of home, the smell of Mom's cornbread, the way my dad used to clap me on the back when I walked through the door. For so long, that picture had kept me going. I remember thinking about that on the drive from the base. The sun was dropping low over the desert, painting everything this deep copper color. I caught myself smiling, even humming along to a song I didn't even like. That is exactly when real life has a way of hitting you sideways, when you let your guard down for one small moment. And if you're listening to this right now, I'm curious where life has you at this moment. Some of you tell me you fold laundry, walk the dog, or sit on your porch with a cup of coffee while listening. For me, I was just pulling into my hometown, feeling hopeful in a way I hadn't felt in years, when everything shifted. I parked in the old gravel driveway and grabbed my duffel out of the back seat. I could almost hear my sister Colton laughing as a little girl, running barefoot through this same gravel, yelling at me to slow down. Now she was marrying a man I barely knew, and I figured this wedding weekend would be our chance to reconnect. I even brought a small gift for her, tucked deep in my bag, something I thought she would love. I reached the porch, took a breath, and pushed the front door open. Silence. Not the kind you get when people are asleep, the thick, sharp kind, like everyone had stopped talking a second before I arrived. The living room lights were on, the Christmas wreath still hanging on the wall since we never took it down, early in January. But the warmth was missing. My boots froze mid-step. David was sitting on the far side of the room, shoulders tight, jaw locked, staring straight at me. Not the welcoming look I imagined, not even close. It was the look he used to give strangers he didn't trust. My mom was perched on the edge of the sofa, fingers twisting at her necklace, eyes darting away from mine. She looked guilty, like someone rehearsing what not to say. And then there was Colton, my baby sister, the bride-to-be, the one I came home for. She was tucked slightly behind Dean Mercer, her fiancé, who stood tall like he had been expecting a fight. He had one hand placed on her shoulder, fingers curved in this casual but territorial way that made my stomach tighten. That gesture was a warning. It said, "She's with me now, not you." Dean's eyes locked on mine, and something under the surface flickered. I had seen that same flicker in a cockpit once, right before a pilot lied during a debrief. It was a small instinctual tell that never went away, no matter how good the person became at pretending. No one moved. No one smiled. No one even said, "Welcome home." I tried to force a half laugh, something to break the tension, but the air in that room was dense, like it was holding its breath. Dad finally stood up. He didn't come closer. He just squared his shoulders and said my name slowly, like it tasted bitter in his mouth. Sloan. Then he paused. "We need to talk." For a split second, I wondered if something had happened during one of my missions. Maybe a newspaper printed something wrong. Maybe my last rescue hit the news in a way that scared them. But I saw the way my sister stiffened, the way Dean tightened his grip on her shoulder, and every thought in my head scattered. Dad's voice was hard. "Until we sort out what you did, you are no longer part of this family." The words punched straight through me. I felt my fingers loosen around the strap of my duffel. What I did? He said it like there was evidence, like there was no question. Mom still wouldn't look at me. She just stared down at her hands, twisting her ring so hard I thought she might break it. Colton took a tiny step backward behind Dean, almost hiding. I had not seen her hide from anything since she was 12. It made something twist painfully in my chest. I asked them what they were talking about. My voice came out steady, trained from years of staying calm under pressure. But I could hear my pulse in my ears. Dad just shook his head, like he was disappointed in me for asking. "You know what you did." Except I didn't. I truly didn't. My eyes flicked toward Dean. He didn't blink. Something about his expression was too controlled. He looked like a man who had prepared for this moment, like he expected the room to turn on me and was satisfied with the result. I searched my sister's face for anything, any hint of the girl who used to sneak into my bed during thunderstorms, whispering that I was her hero. But she avoided my eyes too, clinging closer to the man standing in front of her. Dad crossed his arms. "Until we figure this out, you won't attend the wedding. You won't stay here. You won't be involved in anything. You need to pack and leave." The coldness in his voice didn't sound like the man who raised me. It sounded like someone repeating lines they'd already practiced. I opened my mouth to speak, but nothing came out. My throat felt raw, tight, like someone had wrapped a rope around it and pulled. I didn't know what to defend myself against. I didn't know what accusation they thought they had. Dean finally spoke. "Let's give her some space." It sounded like fake sympathy, the way someone pretends to soften a blow they delivered themselves. I turned away before they could see tears stinging at the back of my eyes. I did not cry in front of these people, especially not Dean. I took the stairs 2 at a time and shut myself in my old bedroom. The room was not how I left it. Some of my childhood photos were missing. A few boxes were pushed into the corner, like someone had started clearing space. My old bedspread was gone. It felt less like a bedroom and more like a storage room someone hadn't bothered to finish emptying. I sat on the edge of the mattress and finally pulled out my phone. I had turned it off during the flight home. When I powered it back on, the screen lit up with a flood of notifications. 48 missed calls, all from Malcolm Price, a former teammate, one of the few people who knew the truth about what went down during our final joint mission. My heart dropped as I scrolled. The most recent text made the room tilt slightly. "Call me. It is about Dean." I stared at the message. The only connection between Malcolm and Dean was the base. But Dean had been discharged years earlier, under circumstances I never fully understood. Something about an incident he blamed on another crew member. Something that haunted him enough that he kept his past buried when he left the service. What did Malcolm know? And why was my family treating me like a villain before I even said hello? I leaned back, breathing slow, listening to the muffled voices downstairs. David pacing. Mom was crying quietly. Colton whispered something to Dean, and his voice low, steady, feeding her whatever story he had prepared. The same story that had turned my family against me before I even walked in. The door. I wiped my face, steadied my hands, and looked down at the glowing message from Malcolm again. "Call me. It is about Dean." My heart kept pounding as I reached for the phone and hesitated, hearing footsteps coming up the stairs. That is where everything truly began to fall apart. I barely had time to wipe my face before a soft knock hit my door. It was too gentle to be my dad, and too hesitant to be my mom. I stood there for a breath, tempted to pretend I did not hear it. But the knock came again, a little faster this time, like someone working up courage. I opened the door a few inches. Colton stood there, arms folded tight against her chest, her eyes red like she had already been crying. She did not step inside. She looked like a guest in my doorway, not my sister. "Can we talk?" Her voice was thin, almost hollow. I nodded and let her walk past me. She stopped in the middle of the room, staring at my half-unpacked duffel on the floor like it personally offended her. "Sloan," she said quietly, "Dad wants to show you something, and I think you need to see it." She did not wait for me to answer. She turned and headed down the hallway. I followed, each step feeling heavier than the one before it. David was waiting in the living room with his laptop open on the coffee table. Mom stood behind him, hands pressed together so hard her knuckles were white. Dean sat on the arm of the sofa, his posture perfectly composed, like a man deeply invested in whatever this family meeting was about, but not actually part of the family. Dad gestured toward the screen without looking at me. "Sit." I did. For a long second, he did nothing. Then he pressed play. A voice filled the room. My voice, except it was not mine. It had my tone, my rhythm, even the way I breathed between sentences after long deployments, but the words were poison. "I am going to ruin that wedding. Dean is a liar. Colton is naive. They will see it soon enough." Hearing my own voice say something I never said felt like being punched in the stomach. The air left my lungs in an instant. I shook my head so fast my vision blurred. Dad paused the audio and leaned back. He looked tired. He looked angry. But more than anything, he looked certain. That was the part that broke me the most. I whispered, "That is not me." Dean, as if he wanted to calm everyone. "Maybe she is under stress. She just came back from a dangerous assignment. Felks say that can mess with your thinking." Mom nodded quickly, like she wanted that explanation to be true. Like she wanted me to be fragile rather than malicious. Dad did not react. He clicked another file. The same voice again. My voice. Talking about stopping the wedding. Saying it should not happen. Saying her life. I covered my mouth. I could not breathe. I kept saying, "That is not me. That is not me," over and over, but the words felt weightless. No one reached for me. No one touched my arm. No one said they believed me. Mom stepped forward with her phone. She was trembling as she handed it to me. "Look at these." I took it. The screen from me. "This wedding will not happen. Someone needs to stop this." Another message said, "I will not let him fool her." The timestamps were from the afternoon I was still in the air flying from Alaska. I stared at them until the numbers blurred. My stomach twisted, my hands shaking. I could feel tears pushing behind my eyes, but I swallowed them down because I refused. Her voice cracked. "Why would you do this, Sloan? Why would you ruin this for me?" I met her eyes. I told her I did not send those messages. I told her I was on a flight at the time. I told my life like it was a costume they could slip into. But she looked past me toward her fiancé, seeking his expression, his reaction, his protection. He leaned closer to her, hand rubbing her back in slow circles. "Let us give Sloan some grace. She might be overwhelmed. These missions can be hard. You know how tough her job is." I could have screamed. I could have ripped the laptop out of my dad's hands and thrown it. Because Dean was doing exactly what he intended, playing the reasonable man. They were almost brother-in-law. The calm voice in the storm he created. David folded his arms. His eyes were sharp. "You need to understand something. This family is already under a lot of stress. We cannot have you creating more chaos." I asked what chaos was. I asked what evidence they had besides a fake voice clip and manipulated messages. I asked why they were so quick to believe something this unbelievable. Dad's jaw tightened. "You admitted yourself that Dean had issues in the past when he was in the service. And now this. Maybe you came back with feelings about him that you did not say out loud." My throat felt raw. I told him that was not what happened. I told him he did not know anything about what happened back then. I told him none of this had anything to do with jealousy or rivalry or whatever story they were building in their heads. But it did not matter. They had already made their decision hours, maybe days before I even pulled into the driveway. Colton's voice cracked again. "Are you that jealous, Sloan? That I am getting married? That I am happy?" I stepped forward. "Colton, look at me. Please. That is not my voice on that recording. Those messages were not from me. I love you more than anything. I would never hurt you." She flinched backward like my words burned her. Dean reached for her hand. His voice was low. "Maybe she needs time. Maybe she needs help." Mom nodded again like a puppet. Dad turned the laptop toward me. "Until we sort this out, you are not welcome here. I will not have you ruining your sister's life." It felt like the floor fell out from under me. I did the only thing I could do. I stepped backward until my legs hit the stair railing. I held my head high, refusing to give Dean the satisfaction of seeing me fall apart. My phone buzzed in my pocket. I ignored it at first, waiting for someone, anyone, to say something human. No one did. Not even my sister. When I finally pulled the phone out, Malcolm's name lit up the screen. I stared at it as it rang, then answered. His voice came through fast, strained, and urgent. "Sloan, listen to me. Dean is not who he says he is." I looked across the room at the man who had just guided my own family against me. Malcolm kept talking, his voice sharp. "You need to get out of that house right now," Malcolm said. And there was something in his voice I had never heard from him before. It was not scary exactly, but it was close. I walked straight out the front door while he was still talking. No one stopped me. No one called my name. The air outside felt hotter than it should have for late winter in Prescott. the kind of dry heat that makes your tongue stick to the roof of your mouth. I stepped off the porch and headed toward my car, phone pressed to my ear. "Slow down," I said, my voice coming out steadier than I felt. "What are you talking about?" Malcolm exhaled hard. "Dean is not who he told your family he is. I thought you knew that. When I realized he was somehow connected to you, I started calling. He is trouble, Sloan. Real trouble." I opened the driver's side door and dropped into the seat. The house loomed in the rearview mirror. Lights glowed in the living room where my family sat, probably convincing themselves they had done the right thing by pushing me out. I asked Malcolm what he meant. I reminded him I had never actually served with Dean. Different unit, different timeline. Dean was always a name in a file to me, a rumor attached to an old report. Malcolm said he had a friend who had been closer to that mess than any of us. He told me to meet him instead. His name is Luis. He is driving up from Phoenix tonight to see you. He has the kind of proof your dad cannot ignore. I stared at the dashboard, my hand clenched around the wheel. Meeting a stranger in a diner to talk about my almost brother-in-law sounded like the start of a bad crime show. But right then, it was the only lifeline that made sense. "Where?" I asked. Malcolm named a place that had not changed in 20 years. A little highway diner with a faded sign and sticky tables just off state. Route 89. We all grew up there in some way, drinking bad coffee and pretending we were tougher than we were. I told him I would be there in 20 minutes. Then I hung up before I could talk myself out of it. The drive felt shorter than it used to when I was a teenager sneaking out, late at night. The town slid by in blurred neon and dark windows, and my mind kept looping back to that audio, to my own voice saying things I would never say, to my sister's eyes when she asked if I was jealous of her happiness. The diner lot had gravel as uneven as my dad's driveway. A few pickup trucks and a dusty sedan were scattered around. I parked near the back, far from the road. Inside, the lights were too bright for how tired I felt. He was sitting in a corner booth, back to the wall, facing the door. Old habits never die in people like us. He was about mid-30s, Latino, dark hair, close-cropped, with a scar near his jaw that looked like it came from something more serious than a bar fight. He wore a simple flannel shirt and a pair of jeans, nothing flashy, but there was a tension in his shoulders like he was ready to move at any second. He stood when he saw me and gave a small nod. "You must be Sloan," he said. I slid into the booth opposite him. A waitress dropped off a coffee for him and a glass of water for me. Like she had already been told, we did not have time to look at menus. I asked if he served with Dean. He gave a short laugh that did not reach his eyes. "Served near him," he said. "Same airbase outside of Las Vegas. Different squadron." We crossed paths more than I would have liked. He took a sip of coffee, studying me. "Malcolm said you did not know Dean was in your orbit until you landed today," Louise said. "That's right," I nodded. I told him I had heard Dean's name years ago. I knew there had been trouble, but I never saw the man in person. Not that I remembered. Louise reached down and pulled a worn folder from a backpack at his feet. He laid it on the table between us. "You should." He flipped it open. Inside were a handful of printed photos and a few sheets of paper that looked like copies of official reports. My stomach tightened at the sight of military letterhead. I had seen too many of those in my life, most of them written when something had gone wrong. Luis tapped one of the photos with his finger. The image was grainy, clearly from a security camera. It showed a hallway in a low concrete building I instantly recognized as one of the maintenance wings from that Nevada base. In the frame, a man in uniform was shouting at someone out of view, arm raised in a way that was dangerously close to physical. Another man stood a few feet behind him, looking like he wanted to step in but was stuck. And off to the side, blurred but unmistakable, was me. Head turned, walking past, glancing back over my shoulder with a frown. My name was written in blue ink on the margin. I stared at the photo until the edges of it shimmered. "I do not remember this," I said. "You had just come off a medevac run," Louise said. "You passed by the hallway while Dean was chewing out a younger tech over some missing equipment. It escalated, like it always did with him. You looked, clocked the situation, then kept walking, because you had your own crew to worry about. But," he shrugged, "your name still ended up in the report as someone who could possibly have seen something." He pulled out a printout. Sure enough, my name sat in a list of possible witnesses. Nothing accusatory, just a line in black and white. Dean never forgot that. Luis said quietly. He hates loose ends. Hates anyone who could tell a story different than his. I asked what happened to the younger tech. Luis looked away for a second, jaw tightening. His career did not survive Dean, he said. Accusations, blame, paperwork twisted just enough to push everything on him. Dean walked away with his hands mostly clean, until he screwed up again. Luis flipped to another page. This one a summary of disciplinary action. I did not need every detail to understand the core of it. Unauthorized use of base resources. Lying to superior officers. A pattern of manipulative behavior. The final line was clear even through the smudged ink. Other than honorable discharge. I felt the words in my gut more than I read them. In our world, that phrase was like a brand. It followed you forever. In every job application, every background check. It was the military's way of saying, this person cannot be trusted with our name anymore. Luis watched my face. Your dad knows any of this? He asked. I let out a short, humorless laugh. My dad thinks Dean is some kind of hero. You know how that goes. Guy says he served, throws a few acronyms around, swears he wants to take care of the girl, and suddenly, he is the son he always wanted. Luis nodded slowly. Guys like Dean get really good at that. The charm, the language, they figure out what people want to hear and feed them just enough of it. He sat back a little, folding his arms. Here's the thing, he said. Dean is not stupid. He sees your sister's family as an easy mark, a proud small business dad, a mom who wants peace at any cost, a daughter who doubts herself. But when he figured out that the big sister was a pararescue tech who once walked through the hallway where his career exploded, that changed the game, I let that sink in. He was afraid I would remember. Luis shook his head. I do not think he cares what you actually remember. He cares what you might go looking for. He cares that your name is on that piece of paper and that you are trained to question things. If you got even a little suspicious, you could dig up all of this. He tapped the folder. He spread the papers out more, letting me see fragments of other complaints. Missing equipment, money unaccounted for, people who complained and then suddenly ended up transferred or pushed out. Dean has a pattern, Luis said. Anytime someone gets too close to the truth, he flips the script. He makes them look unstable, jealous, and dangerous. He did it with that kid on base. He did it with a supervisor who called him out for taking side jobs on government time. And now, he is doing it with you. I thought of that fake recording again, the way my dad's face hardened as he played it back, the way my sister shrank behind Dean as if I were the threat. My stomach churned. I asked Luis if he thought Dean had made that audio, the messages, all of it. I cannot say for sure without seeing it, he said. But yeah, this smells like him. He has always been good at getting his hands on tools that bend reality just enough. And once he plants the idea that you are the problem, everything after that just confirms the story in their heads. I rubbed my forehead, trying to quiet the pounding behind my eyes. So he finds out my sister is engaged to him, realizes I am the big sister, sees my name in an old packet, and decides to take me out first. Luis looked me straight in the eye. If Dean is in your house, around your family, around your sister, he said, he is there for a reason. And it is not because he is in love with her. The anger that had been simmering inside me since I walked through my parents' front door finally sharpened into something clear. He was not just trying to embarrass me. He was isolating me, setting off the one person who could see through him before he finished, whatever he had started. That sentence from my dad replayed in my head on a loop. Until we sort out what you did, you are no longer part of this family. It was not a father's reaction in the heat of the moment. It was a line that had been fed to him, rehearsed, and delivered at the perfect time to push me out of the circle. I sat there in that old diner, surrounded by the clink of dishes and low murmur of strangers' conversations, and realized I had not just walked into a family misunderstanding. I had walked straight into a setup. I left the diner with the folder pressed against my chest, the night air cooling some of the heat burning under my skin. My thoughts were running so fast they felt stacked on top of each other like cards slipping in a storm. I got into my car, gripped the wheel, and told myself to breathe. A setup. I had walked straight into a setup. Once the words settled, something inside me locked into place. Fear stopped spiraling. Doubt slid aside. I had lived through snowstorms on mountaintops and helicopter landings in the drop. Dark. I knew what to do when the ground shifted under my feet. You move. You act. You keep your head clear. I drove back toward my parents' neighborhood, keeping the windows cracked to stay awake. Streetlights passed by like slow blinking eyes. Most of the houses were dark. Everyone was at the rehearsal dinner. Everyone but me, exiled for a crime I did not commit. I pulled over a block away, turned off my headlights, and checked the time. Plenty of room to work. I walked the last stretch, staying close to the line of oak trees along the sidewalk. My parents' house sat quiet and still, the porch light glowing like a welcome that was no longer meant for me. The driveway was empty. No cars, no voices, no movement behind the curtains. I stood at the front door for a moment, listening. Then I reached behind the old planter to the plastic rock my mom always thought was clever. The spare key slipped into my hand like it always had. Some things you do not forget. Inside, the house felt different than it had earlier. Not just quiet, but hollow. Like the warmth I grew up in had been scooped out. I shut the door softly, letting my eyes adjust, then started up the stairs as lightly as I could. My heartbeat was steady now, controlled. At the end of the hallway, the guest room where Dean had been staying sat with the door closed. I pressed my ear to the wood. Nothing. I turned the knob and stepped inside. His scent hit immediately. Aftershave and that cheap deodorant brand I had smelled in dozens of barracks over the years. The room was neat. Too neat. Clothes folded sharply, shoes lined up, laptop closed on the desk, a duffel bag in the corner, half packed, like he planned to leave quickly. I went straight to the laptop, opened it, and waited for the password screen. My fingers hesitated only for a second before typing the first guess. My sister's name and birth year. When the desktop opened, something cold tightened in my stomach. I searched the applications list until a particular program caught my eye. A voice modeling app. Basic design, nothing fancy. The kind used in cheap online tutorials to mimic a celebrity or prank a friend. Except the last project file had my name on it. I opened it. A timeline of recorded sentences popped up, each one labeled with notes. Someone had clipped together pieces of me laughing, talking, giving directions, all of it woven into a blueprint for my voice. I clicked play. My voice sounded almost natural at first. "Hi, this is Sloan Mercer." Then the cadence shifted. Words I never said slipped out of speakers that seemed to vibrate with malice. "I am going to ruin that wedding. Dean is lying. Colton is naive." Every syllable had my tone, my breath pattern, the little rasp at the end of sentences I always get when I'm tired. But buried under it all was a faint, synthetic echo, something most people would never notice. My dad sure would not. I recorded the screen with my phone, capturing the app name, the project file, the playback, and the source model. I clicked through each menu and filmed it all. Next, I opened a folder labeled Podcast Notes. Inside were pictures of me. Some were normal, others had been edited. In one, I looked like I was screaming at someone out of frame, my hair blurred unnaturally, my arm raised like I was in a fight. The sidewalk behind me had random shadows that did not match the lighting. I stared at it, feeling both sick and violated. Then took photos of everything. Then I opened his text message sync. A list of outgoing texts appeared. At the top was a tab labeled Routing. When I clicked it, a page of logs opened. Masked numbers, alternate paths, text samples, lines I recognized instantly. "This wedding will not happen. Someone needs to stop this." Every message was formatted like a draft, ready to be sent through a spoofing service. It was a blueprint for framing me. My own number was typed at the top of several entries. He had practiced before sending them. I filmed that too. As I went through his file, I started to understand why the story had landed so easily with my parents. Dean had built layers. My fake voice, my fake texts, images of me looking violent or unstable. He had not just framed me. He had built a version of me that looked like a danger to his relationship with my sister. and they had swallowed it whole. I kept digging until I found something tucked in a folder labeled Receipts, a video file, only a few seconds long. I clicked it. The camera focused on Dean sitting at this same desk, wearing headphones. He spoke slowly, imitating my tone. Then he adjusted settings on the app until his voice and mine almost matched. I caught my breath as he leaned toward the mic and said a line that ended up in the final audio. "I am going to stop this wedding. She is too blind to see the truth." I stared at his face in that video. Calm, focused, no guilt, no hesitation. He looked like a man rehearsing an acceptance speech. I recorded that too. When the laptop battery warning popped up, I closed everything down exactly as it had been. I moved on to his duffel bag. I did not take anything, but I snapped photos of the contents. Clothes rolled tight, a separate pouch for toiletries, an external hard drive wrapped in a t-shirt. I photographed that from several angles. Finally, I checked the nightstand. A small notebook sat there. I opened it carefully. Inside were lists of names and dates, each with small notes beside them. Some had dollar amounts, some had arrows, some had question marks. A few were crossed off. 2 names were not, my sister's and mine. Next to her name was a date, the wedding day. Next to that was a number, 24,500. No explanation. No context, but my instincts tightened around it like a fist. I put the notebook back exactly how I found it. My pulse was picking up again. I had enough evidence to prove he was framing me. What I did not have was an explanation for what he wanted from her. Money, control, something else. But the amount beside her name was not small, and it was not accidental. A pair of headlights flashed across the front windows. My blood ran cold. Someone had pulled into the driveway. I scanned the room. No good hiding place here. I slipped into the hallway, feet barely touching the carpet, moved down the stairs and ducked through the kitchen to the garage door. I eased it open and stepped into the dark. The smell of oil and cut grass hit me as I crouched behind the lawnmower, pressing myself against the concrete wall. The front door opened. I heard the familiar scrape of my dad's boots on the entryway tile. He exhaled like a man who had just finished a long day. I held my breath, praying he did not decide to grab something from the garage. He answered his phone on speaker. His voice carried clearly through the thin wall. "Yeah, I sent her away. She will not ruin anything." I closed my eyes, feeling the words like small, sharp stones in my chest. My dad had never talked about me like that. Not even when we fought. Not even when I left for pararescue. Another voice murmured on the other end of the line. I could not hear the words, but I knew the tone. I had heard it earlier that day. Smooth. Confidence. Calculated. Dean. My dad continued. "She is emotional, that is all. She understands her place now. Her place." I held the wall to keep from staggering. My own father had not just believed the lie. He had adopted it. I owned it, spoken it like a fact he had held for years instead of hours. He walked deeper into the house. I waited for the front door to close before letting out the breath I had been holding. My hands were shaking again, but this time not from fear. This time it was fury. I slipped out of the garage as silently as I had entered. The night air felt even colder now. I walked back toward my car without looking at the house. My mind was too full, racing through everything I had seen on that laptop. Everything Dean had built, every way he had manipulated my sister and my parents. But one thought kept rising above all the others. He had not only framed me, he had turned my family into his shield. And now I had the first proof I needed to tear that shield apart. I sat in my car with the engine off, fingers still curled around the steering wheel, and let the anger settle into something more useful. I had proof that Dean had faked my voice and messages, and I had seen that number next to my sister's name in his notebook, 24,500. It was not a random figure. In a small town like Prescott, that kind of money meant something specific. Debt. Loans, desperation. When you grow up in a place where everybody uses the same 2 banks, you learn pretty quickly that money problems never stay secret for long. They pop up in whispered conversations at church, or in the way people avoid I contacted the grocery store. I remembered my dad complaining a few months back that business at the garage had slowed, that parts cost more, and customers were stretching out paying their bills. He brushed it off, but my mom's worry lines had deepened overnight. If Dean was after money, the easiest way was not to break in anywhere. It was to convince someone to sign on the dotted line. Or forge it. The thought made my stomach twist. I started the car, backed slowly away from the curb, and pointed the nose toward downtown. The streets were mostly empty, traffic lights cycling for no one. I drove by instinct more than focus, until the familiar brick building of Prescott Valley Community Bank appeared ahead. Its sign still lit, even though the sky had gone full dark. I checked the time. The lobby would be closed to customers, but the staff parking lot still held a few cars. That was in my favor. I parked around the side and walked to the back door, the one employees used, the one I had seen 100 times when Mom brought cookies to the tellers at Christmas. Through the glass, I saw a man in a white shirt and loosened tie standing near the copier. My chest eased just a hair. Tom Caldwell. He had gone to high school with my dad, and he had been the branch manager here for as long as I could remember. He was the one who opened my first savings account when I was 10 with the $50 I earned mowing lawns. If anyone could help me, it was him. I knocked on the glass. He turned, squinted, then did a double take. Sloan. He hurried over and unlocked the door. I thought you were still up in Alaska. I told him I had come home for Colton's wedding. The words tasted bitter. I added that I needed his help and that it was important. His face shifted into that cautious expression bankers get when they feel trouble approaching. If this is about an account, he said, we have privacy rules. I cannot just pull up someone's information because they are your family. I nodded. I understood how that worked, but I also knew there were exceptions when fraud might be involved. I told him I believed my sister might be at risk, that I had reason to think someone was using her name to move money without her real consent. He looked at me carefully for a long moment. He knew my record. He had followed every article the local paper ran about my rescue work. He also probably already heard that my family had pushed me away. Is this about that fiancé of hers? He asked quietly. The tightness in my chest answered for me. He sighed and ran a hand through his thinning hair. Come on, then, he said. I will see what I can do. He led me through the dim lobby, past tidy desks and silent teller stations, into his small office off to the side. He closed the door but did not lock it, then sat down at his computer and woke it up. Tell me what you know, he said. I told him about the number in the notebook next to my sister's name. 24,500. I told him about Dean's pattern of using people, about my suspicion that he might have convinced Colton or my parents to take on a loan for him. I did not mention the deepfake or the spoofing app yet. One step at a time. Tom typed for a while, eyes scanning columns on the screen. His brow furrowed. There is a personal loan here, he said slowly. Opened a little over 2 months ago. The amount matches what you said. Under whose name? I asked, even though I already knew. He hesitated. Sloan. I reminded him again about fraud, about my job, about the fact that if Dean was conning my sister, this could go from a family mistake to a criminal situation fast. He exhaled and turned the monitor slightly so I could see. My chest clenched. There it was. Colton's full name, address, and social security number attached to a personal loan for $1,500. The status said, disbursed. The receiving account was listed separately. The funds did not go to Colton, I said quietly. No, Tom replied. They were transferred to an external checking account 3 days after. Approval. He clicked into another field. A name popped up. Dean Harper. My vision tunneled for a second. I gripped the edge of his desk to steady myself. Tom frowned. Harper, he murmured. That is your future brother-in-law, right? Not if I can help it, I said under my breath. Tom scrolled further. There was a scan of the original loan paperwork. My sister's signature sat at the bottom of the form, neat and looping. I had watched her scribble her name on birthday cards and school forms for years. This one looked close. Too close. But something about the way the letters connected was off. Tom zoomed in. "You think that is not hers?" he asked. I swallowed. "I think someone copied it. Maybe from an old document. It is similar, but the pressure is wrong." Colton presses harder on her tea. "This line looks even. Drawn instead of written." He studied it alongside another form he pulled up. An old car title signed when she was 19 and bought her first sedan. When you put them side by side, the differences stand out. The weight of the pen strokes. The slight tilt. "I do not like this," Tom said softly. "Is there any audio attached?" I asked. "Sometimes banks record calls when people complete applications over the phone." He nodded and clicked another tab. There, in a log, was a line that read, "Call verification," followed by a link. He hit play. The recording was a little fuzzy, but the voices were clear enough. A bank officer, then Dean. "Yes, this is for Colton," he said smoothly. "She is at work right now, but she asked me to help with the application. Her sister Sloan is in the military and said she would handle any extra paperwork or questions. We are all on the same page." Hearing my name in his mouth made my stomach flip. The call continued. The officer asked about employment. Offhand, Dean mentioned my dad's garage, weaving in details that made everything sound legitimate. He named their church. He referenced the street they lived on. He sounded like a man deeply woven into our family life, not a predator circling their vulnerabilities. When the recording ended, the office felt smaller. Tom leaned back slowly. "I remember this now," he said. "We had a discussion about it at the time. It is not standard to let a third party speak so much on someone else's application." But the details he gave matched what we could verify. He even dropped your name as the responsible sister. I did not think to question it. I told him this was exactly what Dean did everywhere he went. He learned just enough about people to sound real, and then twisted that trust into leverage. Tom rubbed his forehead. "Legally, my hands are tied in some ways," he said. "But I can print you a copy of the loan summary, and I can give you an internal note that there is concern about forgery and misrepresentation. If law enforcement gets involved later, this will matter." He printed the documents while I stared at the wall, trying to hold myself together. The paper was warm when he handed it to me, like it had a heartbeat. "One more thing," he said, his voice lower now. "I can put a watch flag on any accounts tied to that external number. It will not stop him by itself, but it will alert us if he tries to move more money through here before anyone officially files a complaint." I thanked him. The words felt too small for what he was doing, but they were all I had in that moment. As I stepped out into the parking lot, my phone buzzed again in my pocket. I pulled it out and saw a message from Luis. He had texted only one sentence. "You were right. Dean is trying to pull more cash from another place before the wedding. A guy I know at a credit union just called me." My hand tightened around the phone. The picture was finally coming into focus. This was not just about my family. This was a pattern. A man moving from place to place, using charm and false stories to pull money out of small-town banks and desperate people, leaving wreckage behind. He was doing it now in my hometown, under my parents' roof, using my sister's name and my reputation to grease the wheels. I stood under the yellow streetlight with bank paperwork in my hand, the night suddenly feeling sharper around the edges, and realized something very simple. Dean was not just breaking my life apart. He was robbing my entire town in slow motion, and if I did not stop him before the wedding, he would walk away with everything. Dean was robbing my entire town in slow motion, and if I did not stop him before the wedding, he would walk away with everything. That thought followed me like a second shadow, all the way back to the motel. I sat on the edge of the bed and spread the bank papers across the comforter. Loan statements, account logs, the forged signature, Dean's receiving account, highlighted in thick ink. On my phone, the videos of his voice app, the spoof texts, the altered photos, the note with my sister's name beside that loan amount. It all formed a pattern so clear, it felt like it was staring back at me. He had taken hold of my family. Tomorrow he would tighten that grip until they could not breathe without asking his permission. I checked the time. The rehearsal dinner would be going strong at the country club on the hill, outside town, the same place where my parents had celebrated their 25th anniversary. I could almost see it in my mind. White tablecloths, string lights. My mom fusses over centerpieces. My dad poured drinks and laughed at jokes he did not find funny. Calling them would not work. They would ignore the call, or let it go to voicemail, or block my number altogether. But if I stood in front of them, if they had to look into my face while I showed them the proof, they could not pretend nothing was wrong. The idea scared me. Not because I feared a scene, but because I knew I was walking into Dean's territory. He wanted me off balance. He wanted me to look unstable. If I gave him even a spark, he would turn it into a wildfire. I gathered my phone, the loan documents, and the folder Luis had given me. I slipped everything into my bag and headed out. The parking lot at the country club was nearly full. Cars lined up under soft orange lights, polished and quiet. My dad's old pickup and my mom's sedan were parked near the front. Laughter and music drifted from the building as I walked up the path. Silverware clinked faintly. Someone shouted something cheerful. A band warmed up in the next room. Inside, the entryway smelled like expensive perfume and roast beef. A woman in a black dress stood behind a podium, checking names on a list. She glanced up when she saw me. "Can I help you?" she asked. I said my family was at the Mercer Harper rehearsal party and that I needed to speak with them. I did not linger long enough for her to challenge me. I stepped past her before she decided whether I belonged there. The banquet room doors were open. I stopped in the doorway, half hidden behind a tall plant. There they were. My dad was at the head table, looking proud and relaxed. My mom smiled that tight, overly bright smile she used when she was tired. My sister Colton, in a pale blue dress, glowing and nervous. And Dean beside her, hand resting lightly on the back of her chair, looking with effortless charm to someone across the table. He looked completely at ease. A man who believed the game was already won. A woman finished a toast. Laughter swept the room. As it faded, I stepped inside. For a moment, no one noticed. Then my mom saw me. Her face went white. She touched my dad's arm. He followed her gaze and stiffened. Someone whispered my name. Conversations died mid-sentence. Chairs scraped lightly. Dean turned his head, eyes narrowing the smallest bit when he saw me standing there. My sister was tense. I walked toward the head table, ignoring the eyes tracking every step I took. My heart pounded, but my voice stayed level when I reached them. I need to speak to my sister and my parents, in private, right now. My dad pushed his chair back and stood, his jaw flexed, the muscle jumping under his skin. "This is neither the time nor the place," he said. His tone told me it was never going to be the time or the place. My mom murmured that maybe we should take a moment outside. She sounded torn between embarrassment and the instinct to smooth things over. Dean lifted his hand slightly, polite and gentle, like he was the voice of reason. He told the table they would be back shortly and encouraged everyone to continue enjoying dinner. Then he stood and guided Colton to her feet with a touch that made my stomach turn. We walked down a quieter hallway near the restrooms. The sounds of the dinner faded behind the thick doors. I turned to my sister. I told her calmly that I had proof she had been used, that Dean had taken out a loan in her name, that the signature on the documents was not hers. That $24,500 had gone straight into his account. I handed her the papers from the bank and pointed to the dates and the signature line. She shook her head. She said it had to be a mistake. Her fingers trembled as she held the pages. I said it was not a mistake. I told her I had also found his voice app, the spoof texts, the altered photos. I reached for my phone so I could show her before he had a chance to spin anything else. Dean moved faster than I expected. He stepped between us, smiling tight and polite. His eyes flashed for half a second before the mask slid back into place. "You need to calm down," he said. "You have no idea what you are talking about." He grabbed at my wrist hard enough to make my hand jerk. He wrenched the phone from my fingers in a quick, practiced motion. The sudden contact made me stumble. For a split second, instinct surged through my muscles. I nearly twisted out of his grip, the way my training taught me, but I forced myself to still. My mom gasped. My dad barked my name like a warning. Dean held my phone up as if he had rescued it. He swiped across the screen, brows pulling together in exaggerated concern. He raised his voice slightly, enough for those closest to the door to hear. "This is what I meant," he said. "She has been recording me, twisting things. It is like she is back in deployment mode." I've been trying to protect her." The words hit the hallway like a blow. I stepped forward. I opened my hand and demanded my phone back. I told them he was deleting proof that everything I had was on that device. My voice rose despite my best efforts to hold it steady. My dad's face shifted from anger to something like panic. He saw Dean holding the phone away from me and saw me reaching for it, and his mind leapt to the worst conclusions. "Stop it," he snapped. "You are making a scene. Guests can hear you. You need help." That last part sliced deeper than I expected. My sister looked between us, eyes wide, overwhelmed, uncertain. Her gaze settled on Dean's face. He shook his head slowly, regretful, like he was sad to be proven right. He tapped the phone a few more times, then held it out toward me like he was offering a peace gesture. He said the clips were confusing and out of context, that they did not prove anything except that I had become fixated on destroying him. I grabbed the phone from his hand and immediately swiped through the gallery. Several clips were gone. The training video of him matching my voice, the screen recording of the spoof app, some of the images. My stomach dropped, but I said out loud that a bank did not depend on my phone to keep its records, that people like Luis existed, that nothing could erase the truth. My words came out sharper than I intended, and my parents heard only hysteria. The banquet doors opened slightly. A few guests peered into the hallway, drawn by the tension. My mom shrank against the wall, mortified. My dad stepped closer to me, eyes burning. "Leave," he said. "You are not going to ruin this night. Go." I looked at my sister. I told her that if she walked back into that room without hearing everything, she would lose far more than a night of embarrassment. She would lose years, money, freedom. Her chin trembled. She did not speak. Dean wrapped an arm around her and pulled her gently toward the banquet hall. He whispered something to her about not letting negativity affect their future. My parents followed them, closing ranks. 2 security staff appeared at the end of the hallway. One of them approached me slowly, speaking in a calm voice. He said the management needed him to escort me out quietly. He said he understood it was a family situation, but they could not allow disruptions. I almost laughed at the word family, but kept my voice level. I straightened my shoulders, slipped my phone into my pocket, and walked toward the entrance beside him. Every step echoed. The night air outside was cooler. I stood on the walkway, breathing slowly, staring across the parking lot at my reflection in the glass doors. I barely recognized myself. The door opened behind me. My mom called my name softly. She stepped outside, arms wrapped around herself. She stopped a few feet away as if there was an invisible barrier she could not cross. She said she only had a moment. Her voice shook. She told me gently that I needed to understand something, that Dean had earned my dad's trust for a reason. That month ago, when the garage was about to go under, Dean stepped in with money to help with payroll. He told my dad to keep it private. He said he just wanted to help. I stared at her. I asked if she had ever seen where the money came from, if she had ever looked at the paperwork, if she had ever asked whose name was on the loan. She hesitated, then admitted she had not. She said that when they were drowning, Dean reached out a hand, and they grabbed it. The picture snapped into focus. They did not just like Dean. They believed they owed him. They believed he had done what their oldest daughter could not while she was away on missions. My mom asked why I could not just be happy someone cared enough to help. Tears filled her eyes. I told her softly that people like Dean never help without an angle. Every dollar he put into the garage was leverage, and the loan in my sister's name proved exactly what kind of man he was. She shook her head, refusing to accept it. She said she had to go back before anyone realized she was gone. She reached out and touched my arm for a second, then pulled away quickly. She walked back toward the warm lights of the club, leaving me standing alone under the darkening sky. Dean had not just lied his way into my family. He had bought their trust. And as long as they saw him as the man who saved them, they would never see the cliff he was leading them toward. I sat behind the wheel for a long moment, before I even remembered putting the key in the ignition. Dean had not just lied his way into my family, he had bought their trust. And as long as they saw him as the man who rescued them, they would never see the cliff he was steering them toward. By the time I pulled into the motel lot, The night felt heavy enough to swallow me whole. The neon vacancy sign buzzed weakly. Inside, the room was dim and stale, smelling like old air conditioning and detergent. I closed the door and slid down with my back against it until I was sitting on the floor. It hit me then, finally and fully, the kind of hurt that crawls up from the inside. Not anger, not a shock, something older, deeper. The feeling of being abandoned by the people who were supposed to protect you. My dad is calling me unstable. My mom stepped back like she was frightened of me. My sister looked at Dean for reassurance, like I was the stranger in the room. I had survived emergency landings and high-altitude evacuations, and somehow this hurt more than anything the military ever threw at me. I stayed on that floor long enough for the fridge to hum on and off twice. Eventually, training took over. In the field, you are allowed 1 minute to fall apart. After that, you get up. I pulled myself onto the bed and spread everything out again. Loan papers, screenshots, Luisa's notes. My phone looked emptier than before, and the missing videos made my stomach knot all over again. A knock on the door cut through the quiet. I moved to the curtain, lifted it a sliver, and saw Luis standing there in his denim jacket, hands shoved in his pockets. I opened the door without a word. He stepped inside, took one look at me, and sat at the small table. I told him everything. The rehearsal dinner. Dean grabbed my phone. My dad's face turned red with shame. The security team walked me out as if I were some disturbance the party needed protection from. Luis listened the way he always did, steady and still. When I finished, he held out his hand. Phone. I gave it to him. He connected it to a small device, fingers moving quickly. I told him Dean had deleted the most important files. Luis barely reacted. Most people do not understand deletion, he said. It is rarely gone. It is just buried. He worked quietly. The air conditioner rattled in the background. I paced the room, fighting the urge to break something. Then he exhaled softly. Found them. He tilted the screen toward me. There they were, the videos that had vanished. Dean trained his voice to sound like mine. The spoof text routing, the menu screens from the app, all sitting quietly in a folder marked Recently Deleted. Hope pricked through me, sharp and bright. Luis played the clip of Dean speaking into his mic, repeating my words until his voice aligned with mine. Then the deepfake version followed, my stolen voice delivering threats I had never spoken. A jury would hate him, Luis murmured. He backed everything up onto 2 drives, one for him, one for me. The room felt different afterward, like the balance had shifted by an inch. I sat across from him. Deepfake audio, signed loan documents under my sister's name. Money funneled straight to him. That is not suspicion. That is criminal. Luis nodded. You need legal eyes on this. I called Captain Reynolds, the base legal officer. When he answered, I kept my voice level and told him everything. The deep fake, the forged loan, the fake text messages, the isolation tactics, the way my parents had been manipulated into choosing Dean over me. When I finished, he let out a low breath. Sloan, this is identity theft, fraud, and coercion. If he isolated your sister from you and used deception to force her into marriage, that crosses into criminal exploitation. I stared at the motel ceiling. I asked him what I should do tomorrow, whether I should call the local police tonight. He said small-town police could be unpredictable, sometimes quick to act, sometimes dismissive. He could not guarantee anything, but showing the truth publicly, with multiple witnesses, would make it harder for Dean to rewrite the story. Just do not get arrested at the ceremony, he added. You cannot help anyone from a holding cell. I promised I would not. After he hung up, the room fell again. Luis watched me. What do you want tomorrow to look like? I thought about chaos, screaming, yanking my sister off the altar. But none of it felt right. I want the truth to be louder than his lies, I said, without turning into the person he is trying to paint me as. Luis leaned back. Then that is the plan. We built it piece by piece. He would sit near the back with a full backup of the files. I would wait for one moment when everyone would be quiet and listening. One moment where showing the truth would cut through every lie Dean had planted. By the time we finished, the motel clock read past 11. Luis packed up his drive and headed out. Before he left, he set a small silver device on the table. "Extra backup," he said, "in case your phone suffers another accident." After he was gone, the quiet felt too loud again. I locked the door, turned off the lights, and lay down on the bed without bothering to change. Exhaustion pulled at me, but sleep stayed far away. I kept seeing my sister's face under the string lights of the country club. She looked so young, so sure she was building a future, and all the while Dean was using her as collateral. My phone buzzed. I reached for it with a strange mix of hope and dread. The screen showed an unknown local number. I hesitated, then answered. At first, there was nothing. Then a voice came through, digitally flattened, like someone speaking through a cheap filter. I could not tell if it was Dean or someone pretending to be him, and that alone made my skin prickle. "Stay away from the wedding tomorrow. If you show up, everyone is going to see the real photo." Click. Silence. I sat up slowly in the dark. The real photo. My mind jumped to the security footage from the Nevada base, me walking through a hallway while a fight broke out behind me. The edited still Dean had made to turn me into the villain. The fake versions he had stored on his laptop. If those were the edited ones, what was the real image he thought he could weaponize? I turned the phrase over in my mind, listening to the night sounds around the motel. Cars passing, a door somewhere shutting too hard. The air conditioner groaned to life. Whatever he thought he had, he believed it could stop me. He was about to find out just how wrong he was. I stood there in the heat of the parking lot, staring into the eyes of a man who had built his entire life on lies. And for the first time since I met him, I saw real fear flicker through his expression. Morning had felt far away then. Now it was here, blazing and sharp. I woke before the alarm, staring at the stained motel ceiling while the air conditioner hummed steady and cold. My sister was about to walk down an aisle toward a man who had stolen her name, twisted my voice, and used every crack in my family to wedge himself deeper. For a few minutes, I listened to the hum and wondered if staying away would be easier. But then I saw again the tremble in her fingers when she recognized the forged signature on that loan document. She had been walking blind. She deserved a chance to see the truth. I pushed myself out of bed and washed my face in the small bathroom sink. My reflection looked older than 31. Exhausted, but determined. Whatever happened today, I needed to hold on to that steadiness. Luis met me in the parking lot just before noon. He handed me a small thumb drive and a printed log of everything on it. Deep fake audio, spoof text recordings, video of Dean training the voice model using my speech, loan documents, notes, every piece of proof labeled and time-stamped. "If they try to say you made this up last night," he said, "this log will hold up." I added hashes and metadata. I thanked him, my voice calm even though my hands were restless at my sides. We reviewed the plan. I would not yell. I would not grab anyone. I would wait for one focused moment where people could not look away, then let the evidence speak. The church sat on a hill at the edge of town. I slipped through a side door I knew from childhood. The hallway smelled like old hymnals and stale coffee. Through the narrow crack in the sanctuary door, I could see a crowd filling the pews. Friends from town, neighbors, former customers from the garage. My parents sat in the front row in their best clothes. My sister stood near the altar in an ivory dress, hands clasped tightly. Dean stood beside her, solemn and rehearsed. Pastor Green began the ceremony with gentle words about love and family, binding together. His voice rolled across the room like a lullaby. Dean went first with his vows. He held my sister's hands and spoke like he had pulled every sentiment from a greeting card and wrapped it in practiced sincerity. People dabbed their eyes. My mom sniffled. My dad looked proud and sure. I waited until the pastor asked my sister to speak. Her voice trembled as she started. That was my moment. I stepped out from the side door and walked down the far aisle. My boots sank into the carpet. A few heads turned. Then more. The whispers rippled through the pews. "Is that Sloane?" She came back. "What is she doing here?" Colton's voice stopped. Her mouth fell open. My mom clutched her flowers. My dad shot to his feet, expression thunderous. Dean turned slowly. For a fraction of a second, panic crossed his face. Then he smoothed it into wounded confusion. "She threatened me," he said loudly. "She came to rehearsal dinner to cause trouble. She was told not to be here. Pastor, this is not safe." I did not look at him. I walked straight to the steps at the front and stopped with my hands open at my sides. "Pastor Green," I said, "I am not here to fight. I am here because my sister deserves the truth before she promises her life to a man who has already betrayed her trust. You have known my family for a long time. I am asking for a moment, nothing more." He hesitated, glancing at my parents. My mom shook her head. My dad's face was a mix of fury and something else, something uneasy. I lifted the thumb drive. "Just play it," I said, "then decide what to do next." The pastor finally nodded to the young tech volunteer. The kid took the drive with shaking hands and plugged it into the projector. He clicked the first file. The screen lit up. Dean appeared on the screen, sitting at a desk with a set of headphones and a laptop. He adjusted settings on a voice app. He repeated phrases. His natural tone was still his own. Then the output shifted. My voice came through the speakers. Only it was not mine. It just sounded like it. "I am going to ruin that wedding. Dean is lying. Colton is naive." A cold wave moved through the sanctuary. People stared from the screen to me and back. Dean's mouse clicked through settings that blended our voices closer. A clear interface labeled Model and Target Voice left no room to argue. Gasps filled the room. My mom made a small choking sound. The next clip showed the spoof text service. My number typed into the sender field. Messages drafted. Sent. Time-stamped to match the night my parents confronted me. Then the edited images filled the screen. My face twisted into expressions that were never mine. My arm raised at odd angles, shadows wrong. In the corner, the originals appeared for comparison. Calm, neutral, untouched. People who had known me since childhood whispered urgently. A couple on the left side shook their heads in disbelief. The final clip was audio. Dean's voice talking to the bank. Calm, friendly, confidence. He said my sister was busy. He said he was helping with paperwork. He dropped my name to smooth the process. The loan summary flashed. Colton Mercer, $24,500. Deposited into Dean Harper's account. When the screen went dark, the sanctuary erupted with noise. The room vibrated with shock and anger. My sister had sunk onto the front pew. Tears streamed down her cheeks. Her whole world had split open in front of everyone. My dad looked sick. My mom gripped his arm like she might fall over. Dean's face shifted between denial and panic. "This is fake," he snapped. "She is good with tech. She made all this." Tom Caldwell stood up from the second row. His voice rang clear. "That loan is real. Those are our records." We flagged the signature as fraudulent. The sanctuary fell quiet again. Heavy, waiting. My sister finally spoke. Her voice was cracked and shaking. "You used me. You used my name, my family, my sister." Dean tried to step toward her. She recoiled. "Do not touch me." He froze. People parted instinctively, creating a path from him to the nearest exit. His mask cracked. His breathing quickened. He looked at the door, then at me, then back at the door. He ran. He shoved past an usher, tore through the exit, and disappeared into the blinding sunlight outside. I did not hesitate. I followed him. The parking lot shimmered in the heat. Dean sprinted toward a dark sedan at the far end. I called his name. He looked back, startled, and moved faster. But he had never trained for pursuit. I had. I reached him as he grabbed the driver's side handle. I stepped in front of it, planting myself between him and the car. "You are not leaving." He laughed, sharp and brittle. "What are you going to do, tackle me in a church parking lot? That will really help your unstable reputation." I did not move. "Law enforcement will be here soon," I said. "The evidence is already everywhere. Running will not save you." For a moment, fear cut through his anger. Sweat beaded on his forehead. He leaned in close. "You think you won?" he whispered. "You think you are clean." I frowned. He smiled a thin, cruel smile. Remember Nevada. That base outside Las Vegas. That hallway incident. Here is a real photo. Shows you standing there while a guy gets his face smashed. You think anyone will believe you are Miss Integrity after that? Inside my chest, something went still. Memories flickered. Raised voices in a hallway. A mechanic starting a fight with a junior tech. Me walking past before things escalated. My team lead called me away. Later, filing a brief note in a report. You are talking about the camera still where I was literally just walking. Through the frame, I said. He shrugged. Depends how people read it. I spin it right. You look like you protected someone. Or ignored violence. Or picked sides. Suddenly, you are not a hero. You are just another hypocrite. The truth settled over me like cold water. The real photo he had threatened me with meant nothing. He had never been afraid of proving I did something wrong. He was afraid I would remember he did. You are not afraid of that picture, I said. You are afraid of me. You are afraid that I know your discharge story. You are afraid I read the reports. You are afraid I am the one person you cannot fool. His jaw clenched. You were just collateral, he snapped. Nothing personal. You were in the way. Behind us, the church doors burst open. Voices filled the air. Footsteps thundered across the steps. Dean looked toward the sound, then back at me. And in that instant, for the first time since he arrived in my family's life, he looked genuinely afraid. I braced myself, waiting to see what he would do next. For the first time since I met him, I saw something unfiltered in his eyes. Fear. Footsteps pounded across the church steps behind me. Voices carried into the parking lot, sharp and urgent in the dry Arizona air. Dean glanced over my shoulder, saw the small group spilling out, and his face went flat. He dropped his voice, trying one last angle. Walk away, Sloan, he said. You got your little show. Do not make this worse for yourself. He still thought he could make me doubt myself. Habit, I guessed. Men like him lean on that until the very end. I did not move. Behind me, I heard Luis call my name. He was coming at a jog from the side lot, a dark sedan pulling in behind him. The lights on top were not flashing, but the presence of the car was enough. Prescott Valley Sheriff, tan paint, familiar emblem on the door. A deputy stepped out from the driver's side, adjusting his belt. He looked to be in his 40s, the kind of man who had seen a lot and did not impress easily. Another deputy climbed out of the passenger side, younger but steady. Luis reached us first. He stopped a few feet away, breathing a little hard, eyes flicking between me and Dean. He said he had shown the drive to dispatch, and they had sent a car right away. Then he stepped back, letting the deputies approach. The older one spoke first, introducing himself as Deputy Harris. He kept his tone neutral, like he was walking into a domestic dispute that could go either direction. We got some calls from inside, he said. Sounds like there's a situation. That is one word for it, I answered. Before I could say anything else, Dean jumped in. He pointed at me, righteous anger back on his face. She crashed our wedding, he said. She is not stable. She has been harassing us for days. She doctored some videos to make me look bad. None of this is real. I saw Luis bite back a comment. He reached into his jacket and held up the small external drive. Deputy, he said, voice calm. I am the one who brought the evidence to your station. It is not her imagination. There is a paper trail from the bank and digital records from his laptop. The manager from the bank is inside right now if you want a second source. Harris looked at Luis, then at me. You served, did you not? He asked. Your name is all over those wall plaques at the station. I nodded. Pararescue, still active. On leave. He studied my face for a moment longer than he needed to, maybe checking for signs of someone who was about to blow. Whatever he saw there must have reassured him, because he turned back to Dean. We are not going to sort this all out in the parking lot, the deputy said, but we do have enough from the complainant and the bank to warrant some questions. Mr. Harper, I am going to need you to come with us so we can have a conversation in a controlled environment. Dean laughed loudly, a wild edge creeping in. So she cries wolf and you jump, he said. Just because she wears a uniform, You take her word over mine? This is not about her word, Louise said quietly. It is about your own face on that screen. Dean glared at him, then shot me a look that promised he was not done. He took a step toward his car, like he could still simply get in and drive away. The younger deputy moved smoothly between him and the door. Sir, he said, I am asking you to cooperate. Voluntarily. For now, do not make this harder than it has to be. Dean opened his mouth like he was going to argue again. Then he saw my dad in the doorway of the church, watching, and something in his posture sagged. Maybe it hit him that this audience was not one he could charm his way through. Fine, he said. I will come in, but I want it on record that this is a witch hunt. Harris nodded, unbothered. Duly noted, he said. He told Dean to turn around and place his hands behind his back. Dean hesitated. Is that really necessary? He demanded. I am not going to argue best practices with you in a parking lot, Deputy Harris said evenly. Hands, please. The cuffs clicked over his wrists with a sound that was somehow both small and huge. For all his talk, all his manipulation, in the end, it came down to simple metal and a short walk to the back of the case. Patrol car. As they guided him there, he twisted his head just enough to look at me. You just painted a target on your own family, he said. You think this town will stay on your side when the dust settles. You wait. I thought of the people inside who had watched those videos, the ones who had shifted uncomfortably when the loan call played, the way Tom from the bank had stood up. Maybe some folks would still choose denial, but the ground under his lies had cracked. I told him calmly that the only person who had painted anything was him, on forged papers, on faked images, on my life. He snorted, but there was no real confidence left in it. The younger deputy opened the back door of the car and helped him in. The door shut with a dull thump. Dean was still talking as they drove off, his mouth working in the rear window, but we could not hear the words anymore. Luis let out a breath I had not realized he had been holding. That went better than I thought it would, he said. I nodded, watching the patrol car disappear down the road. My muscles finally registered how tight they had been. My shoulders ached. My throat felt raw from speaking in that sanctuary, even though I had not raised my voice much. It hit me then that it was not over. Not by a long shot. There would be statements at the station, questions from detectives, paperwork that would take months to untangle. But one piece of this was finished. Dean was not walking away clean. You ready to go back in there? Luis asked softly. I looked up at the church doors, still open, guests lingering on the steps, some smoking, some hugging themselves, some staring at me like I was both hero and bomb. No, I said honestly, but I am going anyway. Inside, the sanctuary looked smaller. Without Dean at the front, the whole room seemed to tilt. The flowers were still up, the ribbon still tied on pew ends, the unity candle unlit on the little side table. A wedding without a groom, a stage without a play. The guests had thinned. Some had gone home already, shaking their heads. The ones who remained were clustered in pockets, whispering. When I stepped back into the aisle, conversations dipped and rose again. My dad sat in the front row, elbows on his knees, staring at the floor. His suit jacket was off, thrown over the back of the pew, his tie loosened. He looked like someone who had been hit by a truck he never saw coming. My mom sat beside him, clutching a crumpled tissue. Her mascara had smudged under her eyes. She looked older than she had that morning. Beside her, my sister sat with her veil pushed back, eyes red and swollen, hands empty. No bouquet, no groom, no future that looked anything like it had an hour ago. For a moment, I stood at the back, unsure where to put my feet. Luis hovered near the doorway, giving me space but staying present. Then my dad looked up. His eyes met mine across the aisle. There was no anger left there, just grief, and something that looked a lot like shame. He pushed himself to his feet, slowly. For a second, he seemed unsure how to start. Then he stepped down the aisle toward me, each step heavy. When he finally reached me, he did not stand tall and righteous like he had in our living room when he first told me I was no longer part of the family. He seemed smaller, softer around the edges. He opened his mouth. I closed it. I tried again. I was wrong, he said. His voice came out rough. Simple words, but they landed hard. I was so wrong, Sloan. I swallowed. He kept going, like the words had to come out or he would choke on them. I believed him over you, he said. I let him tell me who you were. I let him turn me against my own daughter. His voice cracked on that word. He scrubbed a hand over his face. You came home for your sister. You tried to warn us, and I threw you out instead. For a second, I did not trust my own voice. The part of me that had wanted to hear him say those things for days leaned forward. The part that had been the obedient oldest child for years wanted to brush it aside and tell him it was fine. It was not fine. I told him that. Not cruelly, just honestly. No, I said. It was not fine. He nodded, almost like he had expected that, maybe even needed it. I am sorry, he said quietly. I do not know if that means much after everything, but I am so damn sorry, kiddo. The old nickname hit something deep. Tears blurred my vision for the first time that day. I blinked them back until the room reappeared. I told him I believed his apology. Because I did. I told him I could see that he meant it. But I also told him that trust does not bounce back like a rubber band. It stretches. It breaks. Sometimes you can tie it together again, but there is always a knot. Learning is going to take time, Dad, I said. For me. Maybe for you, too. He nodded again, eyes shining. Whatever it takes, he said. I will wait. I will show up. I will not let some smooth-talking stranger define my family again. My mom had come up the aisle while we were talking, wiping her eyes with the tissue. She reached for me hesitantly, like she was afraid I would pull away. I did not. She wrapped her arms around me and hugged me tighter than she had in years. I felt her shoulders shaking. I messed up, she said against my ear. I wanted to believe we were saved. I wanted to think someone finally saw your father and your sister and wanted to help. I did not want to look too close at the price of that help. And when you tried to tell me the truth, I chose the story that made me feel safer instead. I thought about all the times she had smoothed over conflict in our house, telling me to be the bigger person, to keep the peace. It was her way of coping. It had finally caught up with her. I pulled back enough to see her face. You hurt me, I said. I am not going to pretend you did not. But I am glad you see it now. She nodded, tears sliding down her cheeks. Can you forgive me? She asked. Not today, but someday. Forgiveness is a strange thing. It is not one big sweeping moment. Not really. It is 1,000 small choices not to let bitterness run the show. I could feel the first of those choices waiting. I told her I hoped so, that I wanted to, that we would see. She squeezed my hands and stepped back, giving space for the person who had been sitting quietly on the front pew, watching all of this with shattered eyes. Colton stood slowly. Her dress rustled in the quiet sanctuary. The veil hung crooked. Mascara streaked her cheeks. She looked younger than 26 at that moment. She looked like the little girl who used to crawl into my bed when thunderstorms rolled over the house. She walked up to me, then stopped, like she did not know how to close the distance. I am so sorry, she said. Her voice broke halfway through. I was so mean. I said such awful things to you. I believed him. I thought you were just jealous or trying to control my life. Her hands went to her face. You have been saving me since I was a kid, and I could not even listen when you tried to save me from this. That did it. The tears I had been holding behind my eyes all day finally slipped free. I told her I loved her, that I had never wanted to take anything from her, only to keep her from waking up one day buried under debt and regret and a man who saw her as a means to an end. She nodded, sobbing openly now. You always jump first, she said. Off cliffs, into lakes, off the roof into the snow when we were kids, into burning messes for strangers. I did not realize you were still doing that for me. She stepped forward, and this time I met her hug halfway. We clung to each other, like we were both trying to keep from drowning. I forgave her aloud, in the smallest way I knew how. I told her I understood why she had wanted to believe in the fairy tale, why the idea of a man who swoops in and fixes everything is so seductive. When your life feels like it is falling apart, but But I also told her that we would have to rebuild the trust between us slowly. Not because I wanted to punish her, because I wanted what we built next to be solid. Behind us, the decorator quietly started taking down a string of flowers that had been hanging across the front. The sound of tape coming off wood seemed strangely loud. Someone in the back row began gathering abandoned programs. The wedding as it had been planned was gone. Completely. No cake cutting, no first dance, no honeymoon send-off. What was left was a mess. Hurting people in nice clothes. Blossoms wilting under church lights. But under that, something else was taking shape. Truth. It had ripped through the pretty picture my family had painted and left a lot of broken pieces. There would be anger. There would be gossip in this town for months. There would be legal headaches and money troubles and hard conversations. Yet standing there in that half-decorated sanctuary, surrounded by discarded plans, I realized something simple. He had tried to destroy me to keep his lies intact. I was still standing. And for the first time in a long time, my family was standing closer to the truth than to the story someone else wanted to sell them. 3 weeks later, the Arizona heat had cooled just enough that the mornings felt almost gentle. I stood outside my motel room with a cup of weak coffee, staring at the sunrise edging over the desert ridge. The worst of it was behind us, but the weight of everything that had happened still sat in my chest like a stone. I kept shifting from one hand to the other. The news about Dean came slowly at first, then all at once. Fraud, identity theft, forgery, misuse of federal funds, the kind of charges that made headlines in small towns because people could not believe someone they had eaten dinner beside could do something so calculated. He had been transferred to a county facility 2 towns over while investigators dug deeper into where the money had gone and whether he had tried the same tricks anywhere else. Every time a new article appeared, someone from town sent me the link. Old classmates, former coaches, people who had not said my name in years suddenly found their way into my messages. Some apologized for not believing me sooner. Others said they had always known something felt off about him. People liked rewriting their memories when the truth finally came out. My family struggled the most. My dad went to the bank the morning after the wedding fell apart and insisted on paying off the loan in full. Not because he felt obligated to fix it, but because he could not stand the idea of my sister having his mistake tied to her credit for years. I heard from my mom that he barely spoke for 2 days afterward, just moved from room to room with a quiet heaviness she had not seen in him since his own father passed. My mom started therapy with Colton. They went twice a week, sometimes 3 times. They did not talk much about those sessions, but when I visited them for dinner one night, I could feel the difference. My mom's shoulders looked softer, like she had stopped bracing for something that was no longer chasing her. My sister clung to her mug of tea and kept reaching out to touch my arm every time I passed near her, just to remind herself I was real. She was still hurting, but she was no longer lost. I stayed in town for a little while, partly to make sure the investigators had everything they needed, and partly because my family seemed to need me in ways they had not in years. But eventually, orders came in, and I knew I had to get ready to return to base in Colorado. The morning I left, I drove out to the training airfield where my team worked with the Pavehawk crews. The helicopter sat on the tarmac, massive and familiar, its dark metal soaking in the sunlight. The rotor blades were still, but even silent, they held a presence that always steadied me. Luis waited beside the aircraft, arms folded, sunglasses pushed up into his hair. He gave me that small half-smile he only used when he was trying not to show too much emotion. "You did right, Mercer," he said. I shook my head. Not for revenge. For Colton. For all of them. He let out a slow breath. "Same thing in the end," he said. "Sometimes the truth cuts deeper than revenge ever could." We stood there a moment longer, both of us staring at the aircraft like it was an anchor. The wind shifted, carrying the smell of jet fuel and dust, and something in my chest loosened. Things were not perfect. They would not be for a while. But the truth had settled. It had landed where it needed to land. My phone buzzed in my pocket. A single text. It was from my sister. "Thank you for saving me." again. I stared at the screen longer than I meant to. There was no anger in her words, no fear, just that familiar mix of gratitude and heartbreak that had existed between us since we were kids trying to survive our own home storms. I typed back later, letting her message sit with me for a moment. I slipped my phone away and took one last look at the early morning desert, stretching wide and empty in every direction. Somewhere behind me, my family was trying to rebuild something fragile but real. Ahead of me, the flight line hummed with the sound of crews prepping for the voyage. I felt both pulled and grounded, a rare feeling for someone who lived most of her life between departure and return. As Luis walked toward the hangar, he glanced back just once. "We went in," he called. "Sunrise flights wait for no one." I followed him, my boots hitting the metal stairs with steady, certain steps. And for the first time since I arrived in Arizona, I felt like myself again. Thank you so much for staying with me through this story. If you have ever been told you were too much or not enough for your own family, remember this: silence can be power, and truth can be the loudest revenge. Tell me in the comments what integrity means to you and where you are listening from.